The darkness of space pressed against the viewport as Sergeant Kalen Vance stared at the approaching orb of Xylos 7. From this distance, the planet appeared deceptively serene, swirling patterns of deep greens and blacks across its surface, with occasional flashes of bioluminescent activity visible even from orbit. Beautiful in its way, deadly, without question. Thanatos, Kalen murmured the planet's unofficial nickname. The world of death. Admiring the view, Sergeant? The voice belonged to Lieutenant Jian Li, who moved to stand beside him at the viewport. Unlike many of the other Special Expeditionary Force officers, Jian carried himself with a quiet confidence that didn't demand constant validation. Just wondering what we're really getting into, Kalen replied, not taking his eyes off the alien world. Command briefing was light on specifics. Jian's reflection nodded in the glass. That's because there aren't many. The initial survey team sent limited data before contact was lost. The ship's intercom crackled to life. All SEF personnel report to the deployment bay for final briefing. Drop commences in 90 minutes. Kalen turned from a viewport with a sigh. Time to hear Colonel Forlag tell us how this is going to be a walk in the park. Just another day expanding the glorious reach of Xylos Corp, Jian said with just enough irony to be plausibly deniable if overhead. The deployment bay was already crowded when they arrived. Nearly 200 of Xylos Corporation's finest mercenaries stood in formation, encased in combat exosuits that represented the pinnacle of military technology, reactive armor plating, integrated weapons systems, and environmental protection designed to withstand the most hostile conditions known to humanity. Colonel Forlag paced before them on the elevated platform, a tall figure with a perpetual sneer carved into his features. His own exosuit was custom-designed, more elaborate than standard issue, with the Xylos Corp insignia emblazoned prominently across the chest plate. Soldiers of Xylos, Forlag began, his voice carrying easily through the bay. Today marks another triumph of human determination over the chaotic wilderness of space. Xylos 7 contains mineral deposits worth trillions, enough to fund operations across 17 sectors for the next decade. Holo projections flickered to life behind him, displaying geological surveys and mineral composition charts. Forlag barely glanced at them. The only obstacle is the local wildlife, aggressive but ultimately just animals. Nothing our firepower can't handle. Primary objective is to secure landing zone Alpha and establish a 10-kilometer security perimeter for the incoming engineering corps. A young soldier raised her hand. Private Alera, fresh from corporate training. Kalen had been assigned as her squad leader just days before deployment. "Sir, what about the missing survey team?" she asked. Forlag's expression hardened. "Equipment failure in a hostile environment. Nothing more." "But, sir," Alera persisted, "the transmissions mentioned unusual biological activity in—" "Private," Forlag cut her off sharply. "The survey team was inadequately equipped and poorly trained. We are not. Any other questions?" The silence that followed seemed to satisfy him. "One final note," Forlag continued. "There have been unauthorized reports circulating about research conducted by Dr. Eris Thorne. Let me be clear. Thorne's findings were deemed inconclusive and his methods questionable. His theories about planetary consciousness were the product of isolation-induced paranoia. Disregard any such information you may have encountered." Kalen exchanged a glance with Jian. Neither had heard of any Dr. Thorne, which likely meant Forlag had just inadvertently spread whatever information he'd been trying to suppress. "Deployment in 80 minutes, Forlag concluded. "Squad leaders, collect mission packets and brief your teams." Dismissed. As the formation dispersed, Kalen felt Alera at his shoulder. "Sergeant Vance," she said quietly, "I've heard things about Xylos 7, that it's not just dangerous, it's lethal in ways we don't understand." Kalen guided her away from the crowd. "Listen carefully, Private. Out here, fear kills faster than any alien predator. Focus on your training, follow orders, and watch your squad's back. That's how we survive." What he didn't tell her was that his own instincts had been screaming warnings since they entered the Xylos 7 system. 23 combat deployments across 12 worlds had taught him to trust those instincts. "Yes, sir," she replied, but her eyes betrayed her unease. The drop ships vibrated with barely contained power as the deployment bay doors opened to the vacuum of space. Kalen checked his squad status on his HUD one final time. 12 green indicators showing all systems operational, before the magnetic clamps released and their ship plunged toward the swirling surface of Thanatos. As they pierced the upper atmosphere, the ship began to shake violently. "Unexpected turbulence," the pilot announced, strain evident in her voice. "Some kind of electromagnetic disturbance. Holding course." Through the viewports, Kalen could see the other drop ships being buffeted similarly, their formation dispersed by invisible forces. 2 ships collided, spiraling away in different directions. "Abort," came Forlag's voice over the comm. "Regroup at high orbit and—" The transmission dissolved into static. "Communications lost," the pilot reported. "Continuing to primary LZ unless ordered otherwise." The turbulence intensified as they descended into thicker atmosphere. The dense canopy of the alien forest rose up beneath them, a twisted landscape of enormous vegetation unlike anything Kalen had seen before. The trees, if they could be called that, reached hundreds of meters into the sky, their trunks wider than buildings, branches intertwining to form a near-impenetrable ceiling. "This doesn't match the survey images," Jin muttered beside him. "Those were taken months ago," Kalen replied. "Either the seasons changed or something else is happening," Jin finished. The dropship found a clearing and settled into a hover just meters above the ground. Red warning lights bathed the interior as the deployment ramp lowered. "Go, go, go," Kalen ordered, and his squad moved with practiced efficiency, establishing a perimeter around the landing zone. The atmosphere of Xylos 7 hit them immediately, hot, thick with moisture, and carrying a strange, sweet smell that reminded Kalen of overripe fruit and decay. Their exosuits automatically adjusted, filtering the alien air, but the sensation of wrongness persisted. 6 other drop ships managed to land nearby, disgorging their troops. Less than half of the planned force, Kalen noted grimly. Colonel Forlag's ship was among the missing. Lieutenant Commander Ellis, Forlag's second, assumed command. "Establish defensive positions and await further orders," he announced over the tactical net. "Attempt to re-establish communication with the Vanguard." But communications remained dead, not just with the ship in orbit, but between units more than a few hundred meters apart. Something in the atmosphere was blocking signals. As night fell, faster than Earth standard, Kalen noted, the forest came alive with sound and movement. Bioluminescent patterns flowed across the vegetation, creating rippling waves of color that seemed to communicate across vast distances. Strange calls echoed between the massive trees, some like the keening of wounded animals, others resembling nothing Kalen had ever heard. "Movement at 2 o'clock, reported Alara, her rifle tracking something in the underbrush. "Hold fire," Kalen ordered. "Conserve ammunition until we know what we're dealing with." A creature burst from the vegetation, a writhing mass of tentacles propelling a bulbous body the size of a small vehicle. It moved with shocking speed, engulfing a soldier from another squad before anyone could react. The man's screams were cut short as acid dissolved his exosuit, then his flesh. "Open fire," Ellis shouted, and the clearing erupted with plasma discharges and projectile weapons. The creature exploded in a spray of fluorescent fluid that hissed where it touched the ground. But the commotion had attracted more attention. From every direction came sounds of approach, crashing vegetation, undulating motion, the occasional glimpse of things that defied description. "Form defensive circle," Kalen ordered his squad. Back to back, overlapping fields of fire. The night exploded into chaos. Creatures of all sizes poured from the forest, some airborne, others burrowing from beneath, most charging with terrifying speed across the ground. The SEF troops fought with disciplined fury, their weapons tearing through alien flesh. But for every creature that fell, 3 more emerged. Kalen lost track of time in the frenzy of combat. His suit's systems reported depleting ammunition, rising core temperature from continuous firing, and increasing atmospheric toxins seeping through overworked filters. 2 of his squad were already down. Jenks torn apart by something with too many limbs, Saito disappeared into a sinkhole that opened beneath her feet. A momentary lull in the assault allowed him to assess the situation. The original perimeter had collapsed, with surviving troops forming smaller defensive clusters. Their numbers were already depleted by at least 30%. "Sergeant," Alara called, pointing skyward. Through gaps in the canopy, Kalen could see the dropped ships rising, abandoning them. "Ellis must have ordered evacuation," Jin said, joining them. Blood streaked his armor from a gash where something had penetrated his defenses. "Without us." Alara's voice cracked. "Standard corporate protocol," Kalen replied grimly. "Asset preservation, Lieutenant Commander." Ellis's voice crackled suddenly through their comms. "The first clear transmission since landing. All units, we've lost the LZ. Fall back to Rally Point Bravo, 2 kilometers northwest. The Vanguard is sending reinforcements once this atmospheric disturbance clears." "He's lying," Jin said quietly. The Vanguard would never risk more troops after seeing this. "No," Kalen agreed. "But Rally Point Bravo is our best chance to regroup with other survivors." They moved out in tight formation, each step taking them deeper into the nightmare forest. The ground itself seemed alive, pulsing beneath their feet. Vines writhed with apparent intelligence, reaching for any exposed limb. Spores floated through the air, leaving trails of bioluminescence that marked their passage. "I've studied xenobiology," Alara said as they navigated the increasingly hostile terrain. "This isn't normal. These species aren't just cooperating, they're coordinating." "Like a hive mind?" asked another soldier, Corporal Rhodes. "More like," Alara hesitated, "more like they're all extensions of a single organism." A scream cut through the forest, human, filled with terror, then abruptly silenced. Not one of their squad, but close. "Move faster," Kalen ordered. They found Rally Point Bravo, a slightly elevated area with fewer of the massive trees, already under attack. Ellis had established a defensive position with the remnants of 3 squads, but they were surrounded by a writhing mass of Thanatos' fauna. "Support fire," Kalen ordered, and his squad opened up from the flank, giving the besieged defenders momentary relief. "Get inside the perimeter," Ellis shouted as they approached. The respite was brief. A wave of flying creatures, leathery wings supporting bodies that trailed long, whip-like appendages, descended from above, bypassing their defensive fire. One latched onto Corporal Rhodes, its appendages wrapping around his helmet. The reinforced material designed to withstand vacuum and extreme temperatures cracked like eggshell under the creature's attack. Rhodes's scream turned to a gurgle as something injected into his suit. By the time they reached the perimeter, Kalen's squad was down to 8. "Status report," Kalen demanded of Ellis. The lieutenant commander's face was ashen behind his visor. 73 survivors from original deployment of 198. Ammunition at 30%. No contact with the Vanguard. "We're on our own. We need to move," Jin said. "This position is too exposed." Ellis shook his head. "Orders are to hold position for extraction." "There won't be an extraction if we're all dead," Kalen argued. "The forest is getting more aggressive by the hour." As if to emphasize his point, the ground at the perimeter's edge heaved upward, revealing a massive tunnel entrance from which emerged a centipede-like creature the length of a transport vehicle. Soldiers fired desperately as it seized 2 men in enormous mandibles and retreated into its burrow. "Fall back," Ellis finally ordered. "There's a rock formation half a click east. More defensible." They moved as a unit, firing at anything that moved. The forest seemed to close in behind them, vegetation growing at impossible speeds to reclaim the spaces they left. Kalen watched the ammunition counter on his HUD drop steadily with each encounter. The rock formation turned out to be ancient ruins, weathered stone structures half reclaimed by the forest but still offering solid walls and defensible positions. Strange symbols covered the surfaces, unlike any language Kalen had encountered. "What is this place?" Alara asked, running her gloved hand over a carved relief. "Evidence this planet once had intelligent life," Jian replied. "Or still does." Ellis organized defensive positions while Kalen and Jian explored deeper into the ruins. In a central chamber, they found something unexpected, a modern data terminal, partially overgrown but still operational. "Xylos Corp Tech," Kalen observed. "Recent." Jian accessed the terminal, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. "It's Dr. Thorne's research station. His logs are still here." The first entry appeared on screen, dated 8 months earlier. Asterisk, initial survey of Xylos. 7 reveals unprecedented biological integration. The separate species here aren't simply part of an ecosystem. They're components of a unified planetary organism. I've designated this meta-organism Thanatos after the ancient Earth deity. Corporate dismisses my findings as fanciful, but the evidence is undeniable. This world is alive in a way we've never encountered before. Asterisk, Jian scrolled through more entries, skimming rapidly. Asterisk, the heart of the forest seems to be a central neural cluster, a brain, if you will, coordinating the planet's defensive response to our presence. It perceives us as an infection and is mobilizing antibodies. Asterisk. Asterisk, my team disappearing one by one. The planet is learning, adapting to our technology. It's not malevolent, just defending itself. Asterisk. Asterisk. I've established limited communication through biochemical interfaces. Thanatos is ancient, possibly the oldest continuously living organism in the galaxy. It will not tolerate exploitation. Asterisk. The final entry was brief and chilling. Asterisk, they're sending soldiers. God help them. Thanatos perceives threats on a different timescale than we do. It's been building defenses since our first probe arrived. What they'll face isn't just a hostile ecosystem. It's an immune response millions of years in the making. I've tried to warn the corporation, but they've classified my research and cut communications. If anyone finds this, do not attempt extraction of resources. The planet will perceive it as a mortal threat and respond accordingly. Thanatos doesn't just kill invaders. It studies them, learns from them, and evolves countermeasures. Asterisk. Kalen and Jian exchanged grim looks. "We need to show this to Ellis," Kalen said. When they returned to the perimeter, they found the situation deteriorating. 3 more soldiers had been lost to attacks from creatures that seemed to materialize from the vegetation itself. Ellis was arguing with another officer about their dwindling options. "Lieutenant Commander," Kalen interrupted, "we found critical intelligence." Ellis barely glanced at the data pad Jian offered. "I don't care about some scientist's ravings. We hold position and wait for extraction." "There won't be an extraction," Kalen insisted. "The Vanguard has abandoned us. Our only chance is to understand what we're facing." "And what exactly are we facing, Sergeant?" Ellis demanded. "Enlighten me." "A unified planetary defense system," Jian answered. "Everything on this planet is connected, part of a single organism that perceives us as a threat. And it's learning from every encounter, adapting to our weapons and tactics." Ellis laughed bitterly. "So what's your suggestion?" "Ask the planet nicely to let us leave." "Actually," came Alara's voice from behind them, "that might not be far off." She had been examining the ruins and held up a device Kalen didn't recognize. "This is a biochemical interface, Dr. Thorne's design." He was attempting communication with the planetary consciousness. Ellis shook his head in disgust. "We don't negotiate with flora and fauna, private. We're Xylos Corp SEF. We complete the mission or die trying." A low rumble shook the ground beneath them, and the walls of the ancient structure began to vibrate. "Something's coming," a soldier called out. "Everyone to defensive positions," Ellis ordered. What emerged from the forest was unlike anything they'd encountered before. A massive amalgamation of different species, fused together into a towering entity that moved with singular purpose. It stood at least 15 meters tall, with multiple appendages ending in claws, stingers, and other natural weapons. At its core pulsed a mass of bioluminescent tissue that seemed to serve as both heart and brain. "Open fire," Ellis commanded, and every remaining weapon targeted the monstrosity. Their attacks seemed to cause damage, but the creature regenerated almost instantly, absorbing nearby vegetation to repair itself. It advanced inexorably, each step shaking the ruins. "Fall back to the inner chamber," Kalen shouted as the creature smashed through their front defenses. They retreated deeper into the ruins, losing more soldiers with each passing minute. The creature seemed able to split portions of itself off to pursue them through different passages, herding them like prey. In the central chamber, Alara worked frantically with the biochemical interface while the others established a final defensive perimeter. "If I can just calibrate this to the correct frequency," she muttered, fingers dancing across the controls. Ellis paced behind her. "This is a waste of time. We need to concentrate our remaining firepower." The sounds of combat and screams echoed through the ruins as the separated groups engaged with the creature's components. Their numbers dwindled rapidly. "There," Alara said finally. "I think I've—" The wall beside her exploded inward as a massive tendril punched through ancient stone. It whipped around her waist before anyone could react, pulling her toward the newly created opening. "Alara!" Kalen lunged for her, managing to grasp her outstretched hand. For a moment, they were locked in a desperate tug-of-war with the creature. Then Alara made a decision. She pressed the interface device into Kalen's free hand. "Find the heart of the forest," she gasped. "It's our only chance." The tendril yanked her away with sudden force, dragging her through the opening and into darkness. Her scream lingered in the chamber like an accusation. Kalen stared at the device in his hand, then up at the remaining survivors, Jien, Ellis, and 3 others. "We can't stay here," Jien said quietly. "Agreed," Ellis replied, his earlier bravado finally cracking. "But where do we go?" "The heart of the forest," Kalen said, studying the interface device. Thorne's logs mentioned it as the neural center of the planetary organism. "It's our best chance to communicate, or, if necessary, strike at a vulnerable point." "And how do we find this heart?" Ellis demanded. Kalen activated the device, which began pulsing with a rhythmic light. "We follow this." Thorne designed it to detect and track the biochemical signals that coordinate the planet systems. They moved out cautiously, following the strengthening signal from the device. The forest around them had changed, becoming even more alien and threatening. Vegetation seemed to reach for them with deliberate malice. Spores that drifted through the air caused hallucinations if they penetrated suit filters. Strange sounds, some almost like whispers in human languages, played at the edges of their perception. 2 more soldiers were lost to the forest traps before nightfall, one to a pool of digestive enzymes disguised as solid ground, another to a hallucinogenic cloud that made him perceive his comrades as threats. He killed 1 soldier before Jien was forced to put him down. By morning, if the faint lightning of the perpetual gloom could be called that, only Kalen, Jien, and Ellis remained. "The signal's getting stronger," Kalen observed. "We're close." The landscape had changed dramatically. They now traversed what appeared to be a massive circulatory system. Channels of flowing sap-like fluid that pulsed with bioluminescence, carrying nutrients and information throughout the planetary organism. The trees had grown impossibly large, their trunks fused together to form cathedral-like spaces beneath interlocking canopies. Ellis had grown increasingly unstable, muttering about corporate protocols and extraction possibilities. His suit showed damage from multiple attacks, and his oxygen levels were dangerously low due to compromised filters. "We should have just bombed this place from orbit," he said, voice slurring slightly. "That's what we'll do next time. Burn all." "There won't be a next time if we don't find a way to communicate," Jien replied. "Communicate? With plants?" Ellis laughed bitterly. "Xylo's Corp doesn't negotiate with resources, Lieutenant. We extract them." A sudden movement in the periphery caught Kalen's attention. "Contact, 3 o'clock." Before they could react, A swarm of flying creatures descended upon them, smaller than previous attackers but moving with uncanny coordination. They specifically targeted vulnerabilities in the damaged exosuits, finding every crack and seal. Ellis screamed as several penetrated his helmet, their bodies liquefying on contact with his skin. He clawed frantically at his face, staggering away from the others. "Ellis, wait!" Kalen called, but the commander lurched into the dense vegetation and disappeared. His screams continued for several minutes before abruptly cutting off. "Just us now," Jien said quietly. They pressed on, following the strengthening signal from Thorn's device. The journey became increasingly surreal. The landscape shifted in ways that defied logic. Pathways appearing and disappearing, structures forming and dissolving. Both men experienced vivid hallucinations despite their suit filters. Kalen saw his dead squad members walking beside him, whispering accusations. Jien conversed with people who weren't there, apologizing repeatedly for unnamed failures. "It's the planet," Kalen realized through the haze of false perceptions. "It's in our heads somehow. Biochemical interface works both ways," Jien replied, his voice strained. "We're interfacing with it whether we want to or not." They reached a massive clearing dominated by an enormous structure that defied easy description. Part tree, part fungal bloom, part pulsing neural tissue. It towered hundreds of meters high, emitting waves of bioluminescence that rippled outward through the surrounding forest. The interface device in Kalen's hand pulsed in perfect synchronization. "The heart of the forest," Kalen whispered. "It's beautiful," Jien said, lowering his weapon almost unconsciously. As they approached, the ground beneath them began to undulate gently, as if they walked on living tissue, which Kalen realized they did. The entire clearing was a massive sensory organ, feeling their every step. Vines and tendrils rose around them, not attacking but observing, tasting the air, studying their movements. "What now?" Jin asked. Kalen examined the interface device. Thorn believed communication was possible. The device needs direct contact with the neural tissue. They approached the massive structure cautiously. Waves of emotion, not their own, washed over them. Curiosity, caution, determination. The planet was examining them as intently as they were examining it. A tendril suddenly lashed out, wrapping around Jien's arm. He instinctively raised his weapon, but Kalen stopped him. "Wait, I don't think it's attacking." More tendrils emerged, gently but firmly encircling both men. Jien struggled briefly, then went rigid. "Something's happening," he gasped. "I can feel it in my mind." His eyes widened in shock or pain, then glazed over. Blood trickled from his nose and ears. "Jien," Kalen called, trying to reach him through the web of vegetation. "It's too much," Jien whispered. "Too vast. Can't contain." His body convulsed violently, then went limp, suspended in the cradle of tendrils. Kalen fought against his own restraints, but they only tightened. He watched helplessly as Jien's body was slowly absorbed into the massive structure, disappearing into its pulsing tissue. The tendrils around Kalen loosened slightly, allowing him to raise the interface device. Understanding somehow that it was his only chance, he pressed it firmly against the nearest surface of the heart. The world exploded into sensation. Kalen's consciousness expanded exponentially, connecting to the vast neural network of Thanatos. He experienced the planet's perception, millions of sensory inputs from every organism, every cell. Time stretched and compressed. He felt the distant memory of the planet's birth billions of years ago, the slow evolution of its unified consciousness, the countless cycles of growth and change. And he felt its perception of humans, tiny fragmented beings, disconnected from each other and their environment. Destructive, consuming, spreading like a virus across the stars. Thanatos had encountered others like them before in epochs past. It had survived by adapting, by developing defenses. It didn't hate them. It simply recognized them as an existential threat and responded accordingly. Through the overwhelming flood of information, Kalen managed to form a coherent thought. Asterisk, not all of us wish to destroy. Some seek to understand. Asterisk. The consciousness paused, considering. Images flowed through Kalen's mind. Dr. Thorne communing with the planet, attempting communication, showing respect. Then the Xylos Corp executives ordering his research suppressed, planning resource extraction on a massive scale. Destruction is your nature, came the response, not in words, but in concepts impressed directly into Kalen's consciousness. Not all of us, Kalen insisted, projecting images of Earth's conservation efforts, of humans who dedicated their lives to protecting ecosystems, of the awe and reverence many felt toward natural wonders. The vast consciousness considered this, sifting through Kalen's memories and knowledge. The process was excruciating. Kalen felt as though his mind was being dissected, examined cell by cell. One may live to carry warning, the consciousness finally decided. The rest serve the cycle of life. Before Kalen could respond, pain unlike anything he'd ever experienced tore through his body. He felt himself being changed at the cellular level, something alien integrating with his tissues, becoming part of him. He tried to scream, but his lungs no longer worked as they should. Darkness claimed him as his consciousness collapsed under the strain. Kalen awoke in total darkness, his body burning with pain. Every breath was agony. He couldn't move, couldn't see. Fear gripped him until he realized he was enclosed in something, a pod or cocoon of organic material. With tremendous effort, he managed to move one arm, then the other. The material around him was tough but yielding. He clawed at it desperately until his fingers broke through to air. Light flooded in as he tore a wider opening. He emerged into a small clearing, surrounded by normal-sized vegetation. His exosuit was gone, replaced by a second skin of plant matter that had grafted itself to his body. It didn't restrict his movement, but seemed to support his damaged tissues. In the distance, a familiar sound made him look up. A shuttle was descending through the atmosphere, small, automated, bearing the Xylos Corp logo. A recovery vehicle. Kalen staggered toward the landing site, each step sending fresh waves of pain through his altered body. The shuttle touched down just as he reached the clearing, its automated systems detecting his corporate implant. The hatch opened to reveal an empty cargo compartment. No rescue team, no medical personnel, just a drone programmed to recover company assets. Kalen collapsed inside, and the hatch sealed automatically. As the shuttle ascended, he caught a final glimpse of Thanatos through the viewport, vast, green, alive. Somewhere in its depths, the heart of the forest continued its ancient vigil, now with new knowledge of the beings that threatened it. The journey back to the Vanguard passed in a haze of pain and semi-consciousness. Kalen was vaguely aware of being transferred to the medical bay, of voices expressing shock at his condition, of scanners documenting the alien material integrated with his tissues. Impossible, someone said. His cellular structure has been completely rewritten. Is he contagious? Another voice demanded. Quarantine protocols in effect. We need to get him back to corporate headquarters for study. Days or weeks later, Kalen had lost all sense of time. He found himself in a sterile white room, strapped to a medical bed. Men and women in corporate uniforms stood in an observation booth, watching him through reinforced glass. Sergeant Vance, one began. Can you understand me? Kalen nodded weakly. Good. I'm Director Walsh, Xylos Corporation Special Project Division. We need your report on what happened on Xylos 7. Kalen tried to speak, but his voice emerged as a rasp. They provided water, which he drank greedily. The planet, he finally managed. It's alive, conscious. The entire ecosystem is a single organism. Walsh exchanged glances with his colleagues. That's consistent with Dr. Thorne's discredited theories. What else? It defended itself against us. It saw us as a threat. And the rest of the SEF deployment? All casualties. All dead, Kalen confirmed. Absorbed by the planet. Yet you survived, Walsh observed, his tone suggesting suspicion. Why? It changed me. To deliver a message. What message? Kalen looked directly into Walsh's eyes. Stay away. Thanatos will not be exploited. Any further attempts will meet with even stronger resistance. Walsh smiled thinly. Interesting. Our medical team has another theory. They believe you've been infected with a parasitic organism that's affecting your brain chemistry and thought patterns, possibly making you sympathetic to an alien ecology at the expense of your own species. No, Kalen protested. You don't understand. The planet is sentient. It learns, adapts, which makes it an even more valuable research subject. Walsh interrupted. The bioweapon's potential alone justifies further exploration. You can go back there. Everyone will die. Perhaps, Walsh conceded, but Xylos Corporation doesn't abandon trillion-credit investments because of setbacks. We're already planning the next expedition, with proper planetary bombardment preceding any landing this time. Horror filled Kalen as he realized his warning was being interpreted as valuable intelligence to be exploited. You're making a mistake. No, Sergeant Vance. The mistake was sending inadequately prepared forces the first time. We won't repeat that error. Walsh turned to a colleague. Continue the debriefing and medical examination. Extract everything useful. Yes, sir, the other man replied. And afterward, Walsh glanced at Kalen without emotion. Standard protocol for compromised assets. Full dissection and study. They left him alone in the white room, monitored by cameras and sensors. The plant matter grafted to his skin pulsed slightly in rhythm with his heartbeat. It had been attempting to communicate with him since his return, feeding him fragments of memory and knowledge from Thanatos. Now it showed him something new. The planet's response to the first Xylos intrusion had been merely an improvised defense. The next would be planned, coordinated across the entire planetary system. Thanatos was already adapting, preparing countermeasures based on everything it had learned from consuming the SEF troops and their technology. Kalen closed his eyes, feeling the connection to the distant world strengthen. He hadn't been sent just to deliver a warning. He was a conduit, a two-way channel of communication. Through him, Thanatos was learning about human civilization, its weaknesses, its vulnerable points. And somewhere in the deepest part of his altered consciousness, Kalen found he didn't care. Humanity, or at least Xylos Corporation, had declared war on a living world. They would face the consequences of their arrogance. 6 months later, a civilian transport ship picked up a distress signal from a remote mining outpost. The lone survivor they rescued, a gaunt man with strange, plant-like growths on his skin, claimed to be former Sergeant Kalen Vance of the Xylos Special Expeditionary Force. He had a story to tell about a world called Thanatos, and a warning for anyone who would listen. But by then, the second Xylos expedition was already underway, carrying with it the seeds of a conflict that would spread far beyond a single Deathworld.